Welcome back to another weekly video, and today we're going to be talking about contract flips or real estate wholesaling essentially. Now, what the hell is real estate wholesale and how can you do it? So essentially, real estate wholesaling is basically when you get a contract on a property and then you on-sell that property without ever actually closing on the home. So what this means, for example, to break it down even more, you buy a house which has got a 3-month settlement period, so it's got about 3 months until it becomes your house, because that's when your money will transfer and the sale will carry through to completion. During that time, you, instead of closing on that house, you decide to sell the contract. So you currently hold that contract, so that piece of paper you might sell to another buyer for a profit. The difference between the price that you bought it for and the price that you sell it for, that in the middle is your pure profit, and that in essence is contract flipping or real estate wholesale. It's a very simple concept, but it is hard to pull off in countries like Australia for a couple of different reasons. Well, firstly because the Australian market is extremely inflated at the moment. The only way you find deals like this now, I personally have only ever been involved in about 6 to 10 of these deals. 6 or 10? Yeah, somewhere in between. Some of them I wouldn't actually count as a wholesale because they were sort of like an acquisition and they had to sell, and we just ended up selling it for profit somehow. Well, not somehow, it was a very calculated strategy on how I resold it, but it happens. So essentially, I've been involved in a few of these transactions. I've known a few other people who've done these sort of transactions before as well, and have done it well more than I have, and done it way better than I have. So this is going to be speaking from experience and stories from other agents and other people who've been involved in this. Now, I can guarantee you there are going to be people out there who've probably done this way better and way more times than I ever have. So this is supposed to be more of an introduction into what contract flipping and wholesaling is, and if you can get it done properly and get it done well. I personally don't do a lot of contract flips anymore because there is a lot of details in this that you have to be aware of, and a lot of legalities that you have to be over to make sure that you don't get sued in the process. Now, let's start with how do you actually go about finding a contract to flip. For example, if you buy a property for, let's say, $400,000 because there was a distressed sale, it had to be moved on quickly, you made a cash offer, bought it cash unconditional, closed on it. Well, you're about to close on it, but you take a longer settlement period. So that means you pay a good deposit to secure the property, but you take a longer settlement period. So typically a settlement period for a contract flip would be about 120 days. Now 120 days is approximately 4 months. Now 4 months is plenty of time to sell a property, especially in today's market. Maybe, going back 5 or 6 years, it wasn't enough time. But in today's market, it absolutely is plenty of time to sell a property, especially if done effectively. Now, let's say you buy it for 400, everything in the area is selling for 5 to 550. You can, if you manage to find a buyer in that meantime who will actually pay 5 to 550, fantastic. There's your profit right there. And all you have really done is paid a deposit that gets refunded back to you, because the other purchaser is the one who's going to put up the deposit this time. So your deposit gets relinquished back to you, or well, you take a deposit from them, which is what you paid. So your money comes back out. So you've actually paid no money down, and you've made a profit on the sale of this property. Now, the things that you have to be careful of when doing this sort of transaction, you have to be mindful that, if you've bought from me, I cannot be your agent to then on-sell it to somebody else. It doesn't work that way, because I have then done a disservice to my vendor. When can I be involved in a transaction like this? So basically what I'm trying to tell you is, you do not use the agent you bought it from to sell it onto. Okay, so if you bought it from me, I cannot then represent you in the transaction to resell that property within the closing period. Because if I do sell it for a higher profit, that means I didn't do a good enough job of selling it in the first place. And that opens me up to a lot of legal liability, and opens you, maybe not you so much. But as an agent, I wouldn't take it on. You can do whatever you like because you're a private citizen. If you've managed to, negotiate me down, which wouldn't happen by the way, but if, let's say you negotiated agent John Citizen down from 450 to 400, and you managed to get a contract signed at 400. Now, during that time between the settlement period, you have to get permission to then legally advertise this property if you want to advertise it on other portals. I would be mindful if they don't. The original sellers might try to wiggle their way out of the contract. So this is when being in conjunction with other buyers agents and things like that, or employing another selling agent to then on-sell that contract can be very, very useful. Who are able to do it off market. The reason for that is it also alleviates any sort of ill feelings and its likelihood that the deal will go through. Now, I have seen people make almost $300,000 to $400,000 profit in a matter of 2 weeks from one of these deals. I personally I was not involved in that deal. This is one of my colleagues who was involved in this deal. They purchased it for, if I have my numbers correct, they purchased for $900,000 and ended up flipping it for $1.2 million, and all within a 2-week period. How did they manage to procure it for $900,000? I do not know. But I know how they managed to sell it for $1.2 million because that's what the comparables in the area were. Now, mind you, they actually managed to find this property on the market and managed to buy it on the market for that sort of price. Now, that's been a golden goose. I have never seen a deal like that come through ever again. And I don't think I ever will because they're so rare to pull off. Now, I'm not sure about in US or Canada. It is very different, I'm sure. Contract flipping and real estate wholesaling is way more popular than it is in Australia. Because it is also a lot harder to do in Australia because of the consumer laws and things like that as well. They do protect sellers and buyers in these sort of scenarios. My computer just decided to die and blue screen to death. What are the other things that you need to look for in a contract resale and a contract property flip? Well, you need to make sure that all your paperwork is done through solicitors and or conveyancers. Do not get involved in drawing up contracts or any of this sort of stuff on your own. Do not make that mistake. Please, for the love of God, involve solicitors and conveyancers because you need to be legally protected when carrying out these sort of transactions to make sure you do not make any mistakes so that the other party can't pull out and then sue you for additional damage, all of that sort of stuff. Because I bet you if the sellers find out that the one of the property that you're buying, find out that you've got an on-sold property within a 2-month period for a significant profit, they're going to likely try to find a way to pull out and then find that buyer. And that buyer might be pissed off as well because they might just go, hey, look, I don't actually agree with this. I could have just gone directly. You were taking me for a wild ride. There's a lot of minutiae to it. I personally stay away from them because it's too complicated a field for me personally. There's better returns on investment and better profits to be made in house flipping, in actual developments, in actual long-term capital gains. Like these are unless you get a really good deal, it's very hard to pull off. But in saying that, you could manage to get a deal where you make even $10,000-$15,000, which is still an extra $10,000 to $15,000 on your income. That's pretty good money. Like if you had a 10K pay rise in your workplace, you'd be pretty happy with that, I'd assume. So imagine what you could do with an extra $10,000. So it doesn't always have to be these mega multi-million-dollar profits or mega $100,000 profits. A contract flip could quite easily even make you an extra $2,000 to $5,000. And I've seen it happen. It just comes down to whether you're the one selling it. Like the biggest cost you have to bear in this scenario is what are the costs to hire an agent to then on-sell that contract. Like typically you'd want to be selling this yourself because if you're not, you're going to be paying a lot of agent commissions and your profit margins will pretty much get wiped out in that. Like if you were to use me to sell that property, I would probably do a very different structured deal for a contract flip than what I would for an ordinary job. It depends on the complexity of the deal and how realistic it will be and how quickly you want to move on it. Rather than like a 2% fee on the on-sell, I'd be charging you a percentage of the profits rather if I can get you profits. So if I make you $10,000, I'll say I'll charge you $1,000. I want 10% of the share because $1,000 is worth the time that would require. But if I make you a $100,000 profit, I want a $7,000 paycheck because I've made you 100K extra. It's fair. It's much harder to pull off. And that's why my marketing and my network and my database is where your benefit lies. So consider that when you are looking to flip the contract and flip and wholesale real estate. Now the other side of this is that you have something called options. this is where you can enter into a long-term options agreement with somebody. For example, let's say a farm, where you basically go to an orchid farm in a rural area that's getting ready for rezoning. We've seen this happen in Melbourne, we've seen this happen in Sydney, it's happening in Adelaide, and it's currently happening in Perth as well. In fact, it's even happening in Southeast Queensland. I'm not sure about North Queensland, but definitely happening where I live in the Gold Coast, in and around the different locales around here. Well, people will go buy hectares of land that belongs to farmers or landholders. They will go get an options deed. What that means is they will get a contract on this property to also then stipulate in that contract that they will if they are able to on-sell this to make their own profits. So what happens in this sort of scenario, it's called seller finance. You don't pay any deposit down. They sign a contract and you sign a contract. You agree upon a price that they would be happy with, and then you go and on-sell it. So essentially you're acting like an agent in that scenario. You can employ an agent to on-sell the property because they don't want to deal with the agents, they don't want to deal with the hassle of doing any of that. So if you go and source a property, for example, let's say John Farmer has a property to sell, has 10 acres of land to sell. He wants $1 million for it. You go to John and say, okay John, I'm going to give you $1 million. You will walk away with $1 million. If I am able to sell your property for any profits on top, I would like to keep those. I'll employ the agent, I'll pay the commission, I'll pay all of those things. I'll pay all the closing costs. You walk away with what you walk away with, and then the rest of it is my headache. Now John might turn around and go, oh, you know what, no, I'd just rather get an agent myself and keep all the profits. But if John Farmer does not want to deal with the hassles of doing all of that stuff and going through the process, they might just go, you know what, fine, you've got a 3 months option deed, you've got a 6 months option deed, you've got a 2 year. I've seen one for 3 years where they've contacted a bunch of properties around a particular infrastructure site, and we've done this as well. We sourced found a growth corridor, found a point where we thought the properties would appreciate in value, and they did. Thank God they did, because we bet on the fact that if we collect a large enough land parcel. So what we did was we spoke to one neighbor or one person, then we spoke to the immediate neighbors on either sides, and created a options to purchase as a whole package, and then we sold the package. Now everybody in the deal got paid out really well, and my investor walked away with a good profit as well. So things can be done, you just have to be creative about it. So real estate wholesaling and contract flipping are very much a thing, but in Australia it is a bit harder. What you have to make sure of, to recap once again, is make sure that all paperwork is done through solicitors and conveyancers. You do not touch any of it. Be transparent and honest in the transaction, because if you are not, people will get pissed off and there will be lawsuits coming in both ways. And aside from that, think about employing an agent, but also be creative with your commission structure. Don't think that you're going to pay an agent 2% on a 10% profit, on the sale of the property. Otherwise it just eats up your commissions. It eats up your profit. So instead, work out a percentage scale for the profits that you make. So rather than, say that I'll give you 2% of the total sale price, you go with, look, we can do a 10% of the sale price, of the profit margin instead. So the agent would then have to go to work and try to get you as much money as possible. So let's say if they sell it for a $300,000 profit, they're going to walk away with $30,000. That will be worth their time, but they're also making you $270,000 in return through their network and their database. So be mindful of that when you're looking to actually do real estate contract flips and or wholesaling. If you have any particular questions, or if you have ideas of or want to know more about particular areas of real estate, please reach out to me. I would love to make videos about this. Talk to me, tell me what you want to learn more about, and I'll make those kind of videos. Next week's topic is going to be first home buyers. How do you get in the market, and what should you be looking at? How do you get prepared to buy your first home? Alright guys, I'll catch you in the next video. Bye for now.